that we've got is just a really brief introduction to what contextual safeguarding is. Some of you may know more than others if you've come from other areas. I do know it's quite well established in the Wirral and other places, so just bear with us. This is the very basics, and there will be some other training that we roll out that's about contextual safeguarding in itself. We're wanting to just talk you through kind of where we are in a Cheshire West level, and also where we aspire to be within the next 12 months, and felt it would be helpful really to give you a bit of feedback as to what we've learned so far in terms of the young people that we're working with and that Queensberry are working with, just in terms of some of the trends that are emerging at a local level. Obviously, Nick and Paul have introduced themselves as our Queensberry Commission service, so they're going to take the second half of the session and let you know a little bit more about what they do. And we're going to allow time for some questions and answers. The chat function for our we'll keep an eye on, so if you have got questions and you don't want, I mean, by all means, just shout out. I can't see any hands now, so you will just need to be rude and interrupt us. But if you want to put them in the chat, we'll pick them up in a Q&A at the end. So that's what we're looking to get through today. Okay, and I will start with a very short clip and hope this works, just introducing the contextual safeguarding aspect. Can you hear that?
No, Sean, there's no.
No, okay, audio. I didn't think so. Just bear with. Here we go. That's because I didn't click the volume. I do it every time. Here we go. Let's try again.
Principles of Contextual Safeguarding, brought to you by the Contextual Safeguarding Network. Contextual safeguarding is an approach to safeguarding that responds to young people's experiences of harm outside of the home. It expands the remit of traditional child and family child protection models to social settings such as peer groups, schools, and neighbourhoods. Let's call these contexts. Over the years, a number of people have developed ways of working that reduce crime or create safety in public and social settings, such as safer by design, situational crime prevention, or community safety. These are all important, and contextual safeguarding builds on these to ask how our child protection systems, as well as criminal justice or community safety, can address the harm that young people face beyond their families. Therefore, contextual safeguarding is not just about working within contexts, it is about how the child protection system recognises and addresses the risks young people face that are beyond the control of their parents and that happen beyond the front door. Let's look at what this means in more detail. Contextual safeguarding consists of 4 component parts. These are target, legislative framework, partnerships, and outcomes measurements. In order for something to be considered contextual safeguarding, a local authority or child protection service would need to have, or be working towards, having these 4 parts in place. Target. What is the target of a child protection system? In a contextual safeguarding model, professionals target the context where children are at risk of abuse. This is the context that they identify, assess, and intervene with. Therefore, it is not enough to recognise a child as vulnerable in their peer group, park, or shopping centre, for example. The peer group, park, or shopping centre itself would be subject of a child protection assessment and potentially intervention. Legislative framework. Although criminal justice and community safety agencies already work to reduce violence in public spaces, in a contextual safeguarding model, this work is built upon to ensure that interventions and assessments are led by those responsible for child protection. This is important. It tells everyone, a young person, a community, the person or people who have harmed, that this is a child protection issue, whether abuse occurs in a family or on the street. In many cases, a criminal investigation will also happen, but there will always be a safeguarding response. Partnerships. For social workers to work in the way we are suggesting, they need new partners, those that can reach into the context that we're talking about. Young people's peers, bus drivers, teachers, rubbish collectors, park wardens, library staff, those working in retail. They all become key partners as they all use or run the places and spaces where young people might encounter abuse, and so social workers will need to work with all of these partners to deliver contextual intervention plans that they oversee. Outcome. How do we know we've made a difference? In a contextual safeguarding system, we know we've made a difference when risk is reduced in the peer group, park, school or transport hub where young people came to harm. We're looking for the context to change and not just the behaviour of an individual child who's been affected by it. So when all of this is happening at once, what does it look like? Let's take, for example, a park where sexual assaults have been known to take place. The target of the assessment and intervention would be the park itself. A social worker would coordinate an assessment and plan involving practitioners who have a reach into the park to consider ways to make the park safer through interventions such as increasing lighting, youth work or cutting back bushes. This might mean the social worker has to work with new partners such as the local youth club, Safer Neighbourhoods officer, park wardens or the local newsagent to conduct their assessment, build and deliver their plan. And success would need to be measured contextually, such as monitoring reports of sexual assault or harassment in the park. As the abuse that young people experience beyond their families can cause them significant harm, these need to be recognised as child protection issues. But we know that such an approach requires a radical transformation in how we think about child protection, social work and safeguarding partnerships. We are working with practitioners to turn this idea into a reality. Check out more resources on the Contextual Safeguarding Network.
Okay, thank you. I'll hand over to you, Fra.
Yeah, so as the clip has briefly explained, contextual safeguarding, as you may well know, looks at extrafamilial risks. So, and this could be a number of things. So, apart from sexual and criminal exploitation, there's bullying, radicalization, and the rest of it. That's where we aspire to be, but at the moment we are focusing on the sexual exploitation and criminal exploitation. But as you can see, the tools, sometimes you can unpick the other areas. So we aspire to look at contextual safeguarding on a wider scale moving forward. So when you look at child protection, traditionally we are very good at looking at familial harm. So most of you probably will be working looking at the child and the home and maybe briefly the peer. But extrafamilial harm is whereby we recognize that as young people grow, they develop and spend time outside the home in different environments and contexts. They're spending time with people outside their family, so school, college, and they do come into harm when they're in this context. So contextual safeguarding is, looks at the wider picture, and that's about it for now. So we'll be rolling out further training to maybe discuss this a bit more.
Thank you. So if I just start to summarise really where we are in terms of our contextual safeguarding approach in Cheshire West. At a local level, we've got now a cross-partnership agreement. So that's with our community safety partnership that you heard referenced in that recording there. Also our local Safeguarding Adults Board and the Safeguarding Children's Partnership that I'm representing. And all of those strategic partners have signed up to this vision of having an all-age exploitation and contextual safeguarding strategy. And that's a significant shift for us, because at the moment we work up to, as you know, young people at 18, and unless there's special educational needs, they end their involvement with children's services, many of whom from an exploitation point of view continue to be at risk. So we're looking at how we have that transition for our child to adult services as well as we go forward. You will know from receiving and completing the assessment tools that Fra has already referred to, that at a pan-Cheshire level there's been a change in the language. So where we had what was CSE and now child exploitation, it now says it's a contextual safeguarding assessment tool. If it doesn't, then you're using the wrong one, and we do still see those coming through at the hub. So we're trying, when we're giving feedback, just to make sure people have got the most up-to-date links off our website. So there's a pan-Cheshire change in the language, and as I briefly touched on, we have introduced what we call, short and sweet, the CS Hub, but it is the Contextual Safeguarding Hub. They meet every Tuesday now. And as it currently stands, we're a little bit like a leech on the side of an existing pathway. So our pathways in the West haven't changed. When an assessment tool comes in, it lands at IART at the front door. They put the flag on to alert people that there's a concern around exploitation for this young person, and that assessment tool continues to our operational group each month. They ratify the risk, as you know, and will share information across partners to see whether there's any additional information that might change risk. What the hub's involvement every Tuesday is we now get those assessment tools before they go to the operational group, and we're solely looking at the interventions. We're trying to get young people linked into interventions much quicker than previously they have been. And those interventions, I won't steal Queensberry's thunder to talk about them, but obviously they're a significant intervention for us that's available now. But there are other alternatives as well, such as our youth work provision. We understand a lot more now about what they can offer that we haven't, again, worked with previously. So you might get some feedback through Faraha that a young person's been offered the youth work provision, and that's really about developing relationships and advocacy and that sort of healthy relationship angle of things, as well as other interventions that we're already bringing on board. St Giles is working locally in Cheshire West as well. They will take young people up to the age of 25 if there is an identified or suspected link to county lines from Merseyside, so a really tight criteria for them. But we do have 2 young people working with them, because at 17 and a half they were very close to that 18th birthday. So we're developing our interventions all the time, and also trying to look at what we've got in-house that will help support these young people with these particular needs. We're providing training to the workforce, this being an example of that. And as I say, we're going to share some of our local intelligence as we go today. But even though that feels like a lot, and we've done that despite lockdown and the pandemic, there's still a lot more for us to do. So we do recognise that we need to have some tighter oversight around those young people that are high risk. So we are intending to bring on board something called the Safety Planning Conference, which I suppose in short, the easiest thing to think about it is in the sense of a child protection conference, where the parents are potentially the ones that are presenting the risk to the young person. A safety planning conference would be where the parents aren't complicit in that risk of harm, and actually they are doing their very best to be a protective factor for their young person, but still can't mitigate those risks that, as Farah said, are happening outside of the home. So we're going to start trialling that in the next few weeks. As I say, we've got a strategic agreement between all our partnerships. We're trying to now link up the operational aspects of those meetings. So I've talked about the hub and the operational group. We understand more now about what our community safety partnership subgroups look like. They have problem solving groups at a locality level, and we're now tapping into those from our hub meeting. If we can identify, for instance, a location that we think is emerging more frequently in our discussions, we're passing those things on now to the PSGs locally, so that those problem solving groups can go out into the community and start to influence some of that tier 2 that was referred to in the video that you've just seen. So still a lot more for us to do around that. And I suppose that links with this coordinating of disruptions. With the best will in the world, all the work that you do in coordinating your plan around the young person won't protect those if we haven't got disruptions from other partners in place as well. So we are seeing an increase in the CORN notices that we're issuing to adults where there's a concern that they're harbouring your young people. We're looking at whether or not closure orders will offer us something locally, and gang injunctions. So there's a whole host and a lot more, and I'm no expert, that is available to our housing colleagues and others that we need to draw down on, really. We're also, and we've now done 2 mapping exercises in Cheshire West, in trying to understand more about the links to and between young people and how they may have come to know one another and continue to be associating. We're holding mapping exercises at the moment with the hub members, and then feeding back to the team managers in the locality areas. But what we are are aspiring to do is to also bring you as lead workers into those sessions as well, because you will know your young people best, but potentially will need some support to link in with other individuals who know your child's peers better than perhaps you will. So all of that hopefully starts to give you a sense of how, when you think about the video, and it did refer to social workers, and I want to just come back to that point, but
Sian,
where it's, yep.
Alison Robert has her hand
Alison,
up.
go for it. Sorry, I can't see you, so I'm not ignoring you.
I know, no, I've only just put my hands up, Sian. I just wanted to sort of just pick up before you moved on to the next slide about these high risk conferences.
Yep, fine.
So, and just kind of get a sort of an idea really of where they would sit in terms of obviously a young person that was open at level 4, in terms of, you know, obviously where would that, because when, so if a child is a young person's at risk of CE or CSC, and obviously parents are engaging with the plan, where does that sit in terms of, would it run alongside, would it be instead of, what's your thinking around that?
Yeah, so at the moment we do recognise that there are some young people at a high risk of exploitation that are sitting within a CP arena because it's all that we've got available at the moment, and there is significant concerns from all partners and parents. On occasion, that's potentially that they're being exploited because the parents are negating to fulfil the, the parental responsibilities. But there are a very few young people where we do recognise that with the best will in the world, the parents are unable to protect those young people. If as lead workers and social care in this situation, a strategy meeting occurs because the young person's high risk, but you recognise that parents are not complicit, they'll follow the safety planning conference process. It'll be chaired by the CP chairs, so they're on board with it. We've done some training with them to start to get them ready, and they will coordinate, bring in partners, the social workers and others around the table alongside parents to talk very much about what does the safety plan for this young person look like, much as you do with child protection. That's why I suppose it's the best thing I can liken it to. It will run to the same time scales as CP does, because we understand that there's a significant risk there. When young people are high risk, we are saying that they are being exploited by definition. So,
those young people who are at level 4, who ordinarily we would potentially run on a CHIN plan, or because of the level of risk escalate to CP. Yes, they're the one. That's the cohort.
Yeah, and they are more likely to be your CHIN plan families because you've got the consent to engage them. They are not the person that's presenting the risk to their young person. Yeah. So they would sit within that safety planning conference.
Where does the what's the time frames for that model in terms of holding a meeting and then running a review?
Because I'm just very like the CP conference.
That is going to create quite significant delay in the CHIN teams if we've got a young person open at level 4 but not on a child protection plan. That's going to create delay within CHIN. Are you with me?
But if they were running with the timescales that was CP rather than CHIN,
but they wouldn't be held they wouldn't be held in the CHIN team, would they? They'd be held in the CP court team. So for us, for the CHIN teams, obviously we're doing assessments and running CHIN plans, and the aim of our CHIN plans would not be to have them open for 9 months, which potentially that's what you're looking at, is that model, aren't you? Just raising that as an issue, really.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful feedback, Alison. I'll take that back.
Bottlenecking. Because obviously we have children, young people who are high risk CE in CHIN duty referral and assessment, but we manage them with the support of Queensbury, but we certainly don't have them open for 6 to 9 months.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No, I guess that it will end up being quite child specific, because for some very entrenched young people, we probably won't resolve risk within less than 6 to 9 months.
We have a lot of young people opening our team who are at high risk CE. Right. But I would say the life of their plan would be no more than 4 months. So that is quite a significant issue for the CHIN service.
Okay, thanks, Alison. I will take that back. It's really useful feedback. Thank you. Okay, so just in terms of then understanding those maps, you should always, where we've done a mapping exercise, get that back. And one of the things that I was going to just say around the session at the beginning refers to social workers. The reason that we've got this joint call is that at a Cheshire West level, we are referring to a safeguarding response to exploitation. So historically, we've kind of gone, well, we do safeguarding, the police do anything that's kind of in the community. We're running this as if it was part of the continuum of needs. So we're not expecting that it's just a social work led response. As you know, early help and prevention are leading tasks where there's medium risk, and that will continue to be the case. So even though the national contextual safeguarding is pushing a social work led response, we're saying that it's about a needs led response here in line with our continuum. So it will involve early help as well as social care. That was a question that came up in our first session, so I just want to clarify that. We're doing some work behind the scenes around the Liquid Logic CSE platform, which is quite defunct currently, but we're hoping to bring that up to speed so we can record everything into there as a contextual safeguarding platform, and we're looking at whether our partners can actually update that as well. And as Farah's already said there, we're looking to make sure that as we roll out a contextual response, we are doing that beyond the remit of just exploitation. And we are seeing lots of that coming through anyway, a significant number of young people where their history is around bullying, that's led to their isolation, that's led to their vulnerability to exploitation. So we're starting to intervene with some of the things that are underpinning their risk anyway, naturally. So that's kind of what we've got left to do, which is, as you can see, is a lot. What we've learned so far, again, potentially things that you're already seeing within your practice, but some really, really good examples of multi-agency plans and multi-agency assessment tools that are coming in. From a hub perspective, when we get a tool that's been completed with multi-agency partners input, so where a child's already opened on a plan and they're having those conversations around that planning table, and that's coming in as part of the assessment tool, we are getting children into the right intervention much quicker. Where we get single agency assessment tools, and sometimes they can't be avoided, if young people aren't open to anybody, we can see gaps sometimes. So we're trying to work out how the pathway can support that. So there is inconsistency. What we would say is there's not always evident from the audits that the Safeguarding Children Partnership undertake, whether or not the assessment tool for exploitation influences the child and family assessment or the 360. We see some good examples, but again, we see some where there's very little reference to the exploitation tool that should be really supporting that. So something we've picked out. And just by way of language, the contextual safeguarding tool, it is an assessment, as the title suggests. It's not a referral for support. So they're getting fewer, but we are just getting some in that says, no, we'd like Queensbury, thank you, at the bottom. So that won't get you a Queensbury intervention for young person, because as I say, we're very focused on their needs. And actually, if a child has got mental health needs and lots of other concerns, has just been open to CAMS, we could be overwhelming young people with multiple offers of support. So those are the sorts of things that we're starting to think through more carefully at the hub meeting, and that would be the sorts of thing that Farah comes back to you about, to say, Queensbury's accessible is now the right time for your young person. So so that's in terms of assessment. I'm just keeping an eye to the time. In terms of our pathways and processes, I think really what I've just said there is a risk that we can be too quick to act, to put an intervention in. So if you are doing child and family assessments and 360s, we will on occasion hang back until you've completed that and ask you to just update the hub through Farah when you're ready for that intervention to happen, because we don't want to be taking control away from the lead workers and those that are assessing the young people and their wider needs. So we're very mindful of that. We did start out quite naively going, right, if the assessment tool says low, medium or high, here's the pathway for intervention that will follow. And we started October the 13th with the hub meetings. By Christmas, we'd recognised that we needed to dump that approach, because you can have a high risk young person who really needs youth work intervention more so to start with in terms of longer term relationships where there's perhaps risk around CSE, they might need Queensberry and youth work. And you can have a low risk young person who actually we decide we do need to put some intervention into where previously we wouldn't have done that. So one size doesn't fit all, and we are very much a needs led now, not really sticking to that sort of low, medium and high assessment that ops or the tool might show. And I've talked about the relationship there between the hub and the ops group. We're still having conversations. Flagging is wildly inconsistent. We are still finding as part of our audits, and the SCP are checking this on a monthly basis really. We're seeing some that don't get on at iArt. We pick that up at the hub, but we see a lot that go to ops group that are closed and that flag doesn't come off. So when we run a review, we end up saying there's about 90 that have got exploitation concerns on Liquid Logic, when actually there's only about 48 that are flagged. So that does need a look at, and I suppose it's just a plea really, if you're closing plans, please check that those flags are closed as well. And I've already referred to what happens at 18. So just really I suppose to finish off in terms of some themes, and we've tried to do this at a locality level, hoping that's helpful to people. This was end of January now, we've had 106 assessment tools received at the hub, so quite a significant number, I think you'd agree. There was an absolutely equal split between male and females in those assessment tools, but where you do see the difference emerging is of the tools that came in that were criminal exploitation, there were 60 young people. The majority of those are male. I think we had 5 females and the remainder were males. Conversely, for the 48 CSE tools, the majority are females. I think again we had a small number, maybe 3 to 5 that were males, and 2 of those young people were both risk of criminal and sexual exploitation. So we are seeing sort of gender specific exploitation. That doesn't mean that that's necessarily the accurate picture, but it's what we're seeing emerging. From a CSE point of view, most young people come from the Ellesmere Port area in terms of those tools, and from criminal perspective, the males are predominantly the Winsford Northwich area. Where it's females at risk of criminal exploitation, they are in the Chester locality. And I don't know, people on the call may know there was a significant incident in October over in Winsford. We suspect that led to a rise in the number of assessment tools that came in. Equally, we did have a significant incident with a female in Chester around the same time. So again, that could have influenced some of the tools that have come in, but it's just to share with you what we know at this point. In terms of the child demographics, what we can say, and this will probably come as no surprise, is that there is a significant link between young people, particularly males, who are at risk of criminal exploitation and are excluded from school or not engaging. So lots of unauthorised absence for those young people, even if they're not excluded, but a significant link between those excluded and at risk of exploitation. What we'd also have picked out is that a lot of those young people have ADHD, are not following the medication pathway, are potentially supplementing with cannabis now to calm them, and that is potentially then impacting their behaviour and leading to it being unmanageable in schools and the exclusion. So a bit of a vicious circle really that we're trying to work with our health partners on. There's a significant waiting list at the moment in terms of some of those paediatric assessments that might be required. But again, I suppose in terms of what you can influence, if you have got children with ADHD diagnoses, asking the question about the medication and are they using it is a useful starting point. We've seen a lot of online risks to young people where autism is a feature of their lives and other special educational needs, as well as mental health. So again, I'm sure you probably feel that with the young people that you
Alison has her hand up.
Go for it, Alison.
Just an observation really, Sean, that once, sorry, I seem to be the Alison show, isn't it? I
No,
won't put my hand up anymore.
We welcome questions. I fear we put people off.
It's more of an observation that once a young person hits 16, then it's more difficult if they've stopped taking their medication, because obviously it's a real issue in terms of health assessments, but it's more difficult to get them back into the system, if you like, once they hit 16, because fundamentally they've been discharged from CAM, so then it goes 16 to 25, doesn't it? That's a real issue.
Okay, thanks, Alison. I will take that back. What I haven't said is, in terms of our members of the hub, it's a really small and perfectly formed group, deliberately so, while we tested these pathways out. But we've had police colleagues from the beginning. Queensbury are present. Early help and prevention have been represented through Sue Charles Jones until recently. So we've got a youth work representative with Kathy at the moment. And obviously ourselves as part of that, and the safeguarding unit. We've recently asked our health colleagues to join, and we have a CAMHS representative there. So we're able to unpick a little bit quicker now some of these challenges, which is why we're starting to understand some of the waiting list issues. Also, what Ferrara will do is, if we're finding hotspots, which brings me nicely onto this slide, Ferrara will go away and have a conversation with our licensing colleagues. We're not asking them to come to every meeting because we don't get a hotspot every week, but where we are finding licensed premises to be an issue, we're feeding that back in. So hopefully giving you a little bit of confidence that there's no expectation on you to know who to call in the library or at the local shop. We will do that through the hub and start to link in with some of those people for you. So hotspots online goes without saying. We're pushing all our young people that way at the moment because of the pandemic, and they are then becoming at risk. And Ferrara has identified a number of apps, so we will share some information as part of the feedback from this session around things like the Omegle app and others, Wink, and things that are coming to light more and more frequently. We're seeing an increased identification of trafficking in single assessments, which is good. What we don't see is a direct correlation between that with the national referral mechanisms being completed. And if you are concerned that a child has been trafficked, then the NRM does need to be completed, and social workers are first responders, so we do have a statutory duty in that respect. And finally, what we know, and again influenced by the pandemic, children in care that are placed in QAC and our children beyond the borders, they are tending to become exploited more on the doorstep of where they are. We're seeing less young people, although it still happens, travelling miles, being put on trains because they're more identifiable in lockdown, but they are being exploited within the areas that they're living by those local gangs. So hopefully that's a helpful picture. I think we've probably taken questions as we've gone, so I'll just hand to Queensbury now in the interest of time, if that's all right, unless there's anything, Ferrara, that's come up in the chat.
No.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and it's over to you, Nick and Paul.
Morning, everybody. So I'm going to try sharing now. Hopefully everybody will be able to see it in a second.
Yes.
There we go. Seems to be working okay. Morning, everybody. So for those that sort of don't know us, I'm Paul. This is Nick. So as Sian said, we between us we run Queensbury AP. So we just wanted to give you a very brief background. We have got a case study to sort of show how we sort of embedded the contextual safeguarding approach into the work that we do. So I will sort of whiz through that. I'm just conscious of time, but we will send that case study out to anybody after the meeting. As well. Chris, you'll share that with everybody, so you've got that to hand. And if you've got any questions on that after the session today, feel free to give us a shout. So as it says there, we set up in 2018 primarily to prevent school exclusions within Cheshire. Very early doors, sort of, I think it was 2 months after we set up, one of the young people who we had been previously involved with was the subject of criminal exploitation, and he went on to commit a serious offence over in Macclesfield, where unfortunately there was an adult male that was killed in that incident. And as part of that, we were heavily involved with that young person and his family still. So we decided to sort of embark on trying to sort of prevent young people becoming exploited criminally in the first instance, with the aim of sort of reducing youth violence. So all our intervention is sort of currently delivered through educational workshops, face-to-face intervention. We are still going out and about delivering in the homes during obviously sort of during the coronavirus pandemic as well, given the level of risk that the young people sort of sit at. So we're continuing to do that. Like I said, we do school-based workshops, and we also deliver training to professionals as well around the subject of exploitation. Everything we do is underpinned by restorative justice as well. So if anybody wants to know any more about that sort of process as well, feel free to give us a shout after today's little briefing. In terms of our background, so just so people are aware, I think a lot of people sort of were very unaware really of who we are and where we came from when we sort of dropped on the scene a couple of years ago. Just to put a bit of context to it really, that in our, we've worked across a number of sectors, including education and social care. Sort of more recently, myself and Nick were the senior leaders over in Cheshire East at the local authority pupil referral unit. So Nick was the head teacher, myself was the deputy head responsible for behaviour and attendance over there. And so it's that experience and that background really as what's helped us develop our interventions. We've developed our own resources as well, so we don't deliver sort of home office resources per se. It is all resources that we sort of developed ourselves based upon sort of our own experiences, really working with vulnerable young people and those wider families and the wider peer groups as well. We have a few specialist youth workers that we employ as well. One of those in particular is an ex-offender, so he was released from prison last year. And he has his own sort of personal experiences of school exclusions and those links between sort of school exclusions and criminality. He's himself was a perpetrator of criminal exploitation, and has served 6.5 years in prison of an 8-year sentence, I think it was. And he's come on board really to sort of give those sort of personal experiences and sort of support young people in trying to make the right choices moving forwards. We've got an additional specialist youth worker in the form of a lady called Ali Roberts, who some of you may know from Cheshire Youth Commission. So she's worked across the youth sector for 10 years or thereabouts, and has worked with sort of high-end vulnerable young people herself. So she's out there delivering the CSE work for us alongside Nick currently, and she's having a huge impact really on the young girls that she's working with. We've then got a wider network of volunteers, guest speakers. So we've got links with Thorncross Prison over in Warrington. So we do have serving and ex-offenders as part of our wider team. So we bring those on board sort of as and when, on an as and when basis really, on a needs-led basis. So if a young person requires a certain talk on a specific subject, whether it's joint enterprise, whether it's exploitation, whether it's the impacts of crime, we have a number of individuals who we can sort of handpick to come out and deliver those talks with us as well. And again, that has a huge impact. And in terms of engagement, it's massively supported our engagement with some of these sort of historically hard to reach young people and hard to reach families.
So as sort of Sian and Paul sort of said, in terms of the work that we've been doing across the local authority, we've been doing sort of direct work with young people on a one-to-one basis. We've been delivering training courses. Now the schools are open, we're able to go in and do some workshops in schools as well. So we're starting to do some primary workshops over the next few weeks. We're very passionate about early intervention, and as opposed to sort of dealing with or working with young people who are at the sort of higher end of the spectrum. We're very passionate about looking at what the root causes are for exploitation and supporting young people in more of a preventative role. So we're doing some work in sort of primary schools, as well as some additional one-to-one work in secondary schools. A lot of the work that you might have come across with ourselves is the one-to-one work that we've been doing. And that's basically, generally, it's an 8-session programme, sort of delivering face-to-face. This includes an induction session where we gather sort of feedback from the young person and the family, and then they have a minimum really sort of 6 sessions if they're at the high end. For some young people, they don't necessarily need the whole 8 weeks. As Paul sort of said, it's very much a needs-led process. So if we feel actually there's been sort of an incident that's happened and actually the young person has learned from that experience anyway because of the impact that it's had on sort of family, or they've been in trouble with the police, etc. Sometimes it's slightly less, but generally it's an 8-week session, 8-week programme, sorry. And then we do a follow-up session at the end to gather the feedback from the young person and the parent carer at the end. Alongside that, we work with the wider family, certainly during sort of COVID-19 times where we've not been able to sort of access external venues. A lot of the work has taken place in the home, which has been really positive because we've been able to deliver some joint sessions. So some of the sort of hard hitting sessions have been delivered to both the young person and their families at the same sort of time. Because of the whole sort of restorative approach to what we do, it's really important for sort of both the young person and sort of the families to understand sort of the impact and consequences of their actions, and also to consider together what the better way is. And certainly that ensures a more sort of sustainable approach to our sort of intervention, because 8 weeks is still quite, 8 hours is still quite a short sort of period of time, really. So by working with the families, we're hoping, it's within the hope that more sustainable sort of changes can be made. And also it ensures that sort of some of the key messages are reached not just to the young person, but also to the sort of parents and in some cases the siblings. We very much sort of, want to support a joined up approach to what we're doing. So both working alongside social care or family intervention workers, members of the police. It's for us, for some families who've been quite reluctant at times to engage with external services, we're really lucky in the fact that we're able to sort of build those relationships with those families and encourage them to have better relationships with other stakeholders as well. And Paul will give you an example of that in the case study he sort of goes through. Also at the end there's a handover with the key worker where we sort of suggest some strategies. So that might be with the social work, with social care, but also with the schools, again to ensure that sort of sustainable change can take place. And during the handover sessions, what we've been doing is sort of giving the report to the key worker, which has helped inform the sort of review tool for the COPS process. So, what I've been saying is where you can just copy and paste a section of our report and pop it into the review tool, and it saves, time and effort in filling it in yourselves. So that's kind of the sort of process sort of with that.
Sorry, it doesn't seem to be changing now, does it? So, oh, there we go. So, I'm sorry, is that, hi, Alison, you got a question?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Sorry,
Yeah.
It's just more of an observation, just kind of in terms of what you're saying about that 8-week intervention and then hand over to the key worker. That has had a real massive positive impact on the effectiveness of our child in need plans that we've been running, obviously, while you've been delivering your intervention, because of, and particularly while we've been in lockdown, we've really noticed that we're able to push these plans through much quicker. We're not incurring the delay, so that's a real positive. Which
that's really
kind
good.
of, it's obviously really effective. And then we're very clear about what intervention we're working towards within the CHIN plan. We review the CHIN plan, they're effective. We close or we step down if risks are diminishing, which kind of just takes me back to the point about these conferences, because obviously what we need to be mindful of is the life of a plan at level 4 because of the effectiveness of the interventions that are being received now. So I would be concerned if the safeguarding unit were having oversight of these plans and that was potentially going to build in delay, because what we're seeing are these plans. Is Carla, are you on? You are, aren't you, Carla? I don't know if she's with us.
Sorry, yes, Alison, I am.
Yeah. So would you agree with that? Carla's my colleague in Ellesmere Port, CHIN team manager as well. Would you agree with that you've noticed that, Carla?
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's a real success, but I would hate then for any delay to be built in, because we're really seeing these plans pushing through because of the effectiveness of the intervention.
That's really positive. Thank you.
So in terms of, sorry, I'll skip off that because obviously you've seen that in Faraha's a little bit earlier on. So this was just a little case study. I'll whiz through this really quickly, and we put this together really to reassure people about this. For those that sort of haven't heard about contextual safeguarding before, hopefully, touch wood, most of you have done, but just to reassure people that it was nothing to be afraid of really, and I'm sure that the majority of you, if not all of you, already embed this into practice. So this was just one young person that we sort of wanted to just very quickly case study to give you an idea as to how we go about delivering our intervention for the young people. So this young person, he's got really sort of high-end SEN. He attended a specialist school placement during secondary school education. Very much felt like he didn't fit within that environment. He regularly uses cannabis, and going back to something Sian said earlier, he very much sort of self-medicates using cannabis in terms of his sort of health needs. He feels that the cannabis use is something that actually actively helps him, and it's not really frowned upon too much by the family members either. Given his sort of level of SEN, this kid is very, very impulsive. A few weeks back, he received a threatening message on a telephone conversation. So he literally just decided, I'm going to go out. He went out and beat the other kid up without any hesitation, without any thought for the consequences. And then actually afterwards ends up sitting down and gets quite upset when he reflects upon his behaviours sometimes. It's really well known in the local area. Even incidents that he's not actively involved with. There's an incident in the local community. Mum will very regularly get a phone call or a text message to say, has your son been involved in this? So he's got that sort of reputation in that local area as well. In terms of early childhood trauma, there's parental divorce, there's previous domestic violence in the household. So that was just to give you an idea really as to around sort of his level of needs. In terms of the home situation, as I said, there's parental divorce, which is sort of partly the early childhood trauma. Mum's got her own sort of additional health needs, very erratic in terms of parenting. There's no sort of middle ground with this family. It's either really, really positive or, everything's going completely wrong. There's no sort of happy medium in terms of parenting that goes on in that household, unfortunately. As I say, there's a ton of ongoing additional health needs in terms of mum herself. She's had a number of hospital admissions in recent weeks, and particularly over the Christmas period. There is a stepdad who is part of the family, who's a positive influence, but obviously the step siblings that were brought into that household, that family dynamic massively changed for this young person as well when that happened. And to be honest, it's just a little bit chaotic within the family household. Mum very, very supportive and very much tries to do her best for this young person in particular, and the wider family, but just really, really struggles at times to sort of put a handle on his behaviours and pin him down. In terms of the wider peer group, his wider peer group, so as I say, he was in a specialist school placement. When it came to 16, he left that school placement and the shackles sort of came off, and he ended up becoming friends with this wider peer group in the local community, and it was a younger peer group, sort of 2-3 years younger than him, because sort of his level of functioning is very much of a younger person to his actual age. His peer group are known to the police for antisocial behaviours, involvement in drug-related activity, ton of school exclusions. Again, going back to something Sian said about that link between school exclusions, lack of school engagement and criminality. And his whole sort of peer group are known to us and known to your services as well. Due to their ongoing behaviours in the local communities. Drug use is prevalent throughout his peer group, and they, as I say, they actively engage. They are known to police, they are known to the local authority, antisocial behaviour teams as well. In terms of school, again, there was fixed term exclusions on a regular basis whilst he was at school. Towards the end of his school time last year, there was a massive non-engagement with him. He just decided he wasn't going to go in. There's been no additional support put in place in between school leaving and looking at sort of college placements. He's actually had no additional guidance in terms of careers, and very much low self-esteem as well, because of that lack of educational attainment, which has had a massive impact on his behaviours and within the community really. Moving on to the community, there was it is Winsford that we're talking about. So there was obviously the murder which happened over in October, and that's had a massive impact on that local community in the fact that the younger children, so the wider peer group of this particular young person, have now sort of stepped up to take the reins in terms of some of that drug-related activity. Excuse me, and that again has had a huge impact on this young person's behaviours within the community. So we've had to take into consideration how a serious incident actually doesn't just impact those individuals involved in it, but it has this knock-on effect, and we end up picking up the pieces with young people like him who weren't directly connected, but in a roundabout way have ended up becoming involved through their ongoing behaviours. In terms of the community as well, sort of it's quite normalised within the area he lives in terms of drug-related activity, and it's almost accepted that young people, this is what young people do within that local area, and it's not frowned upon by individuals, which again is very difficult sometimes when you're trying to break down these barriers with these communities. And in terms of employment opportunities, as I say, that low self-esteem, that lack of educational attainment as well is actually preventing him from sort of accessing anything positive in terms of whether it's courses, whether it's ongoing education, whether it's employment, and again that has a massive impact, so we need to sort of consider that as well. In terms of society influences, he is your stereotypical young person who at the moment is in all his North Face gear, his Moncler jacket. You know, there's not much money in the household, but somehow he manages to have all these you know, fantastic expensive items. The drill music scene has had a huge impact in terms of normalising those criminalised behaviours, knife carrying, taking drugs, being involved in sort of robberies, street robberies, you know, and all these sort of high-end crimes as well. So that's had a huge influence. In terms of the impact of COVID-19, that's had a massive impact on sort of his interactions with you know, positive peers, and has limited him, to sort of hang around with this younger peer group who he is able to influence, and they're also able to influence him. And in terms of the fact that they're not attending school as well, again, that's had a huge impact on the amount of free, unsupervised time that these young people are having within that local community. So taking into consideration all those aspects as well. So sort of having thought about all those sort of things, when we met this young person, he was very reluctant to engage with us at first. So we had to sort of think out of the box really as to how we were going to deliver intervention to try and get him to engage with us. So these are just a few examples of some of the interventions that we put in place. We've very much sort of taken on almost like an advocacy role with this family, and tried to sort of build those positive links between the family, social care and the local police as well. This is a family who historically have been known to social care, have been known to the police, and have very often refused to engage with those statutory services. So a big focus of my work really with this family was to try and get them to engage on a positive note with social care, and you know that is happening now. We've got mum who actively went to give a statement to the police a couple of weeks ago, which again historically would never have happened. They wouldn't have opened the door to the police usually, but there was an incident that mum felt she had to go and give information about. So we're trying to very much break down those barriers and bridge those gaps between these hard to reach families, hard to reach young people, and those statutory services like yourself as well. We've taken into consideration the wider family, so we have delivered sessions to the siblings as well to encourage those sort of positive interactions. I think I said earlier on, everything we do is based around restorative justice and restorative approaches. So again, we work through incidents, we try and get these young people to change their behaviours, and to reflect upon the impacts and consequences. This person, I drove him over to Manchester a couple of weeks ago just to sort of give you an idea as to the way we go about delivering it slightly differently. Drove him into Manchester to meet with one of our guest speakers. So we actually took him into Moss Side. We walked around Moss Side with our guest speaker and took the young person massively out of his comfort zone, really. And that had a really, really positive impact on him. So I think we're able to have that little bit of free reign, I suppose, in terms of how we deliver and adopt interventions, to tailor them to meet the individual needs. As we said, as Sian said earlier on, these mapping exercises, you know, Nick has been sort of part of some of these mapping exercises alongside myself as well, to sort of look at those sort of key peers, look at sort of connecting the dots really, and making sure that the wider network is also receiving that same sort of level of support. as I said as well, that the information sharing, the positive communication to ensure that these issues are addressed at the earliest possible stages. So we've been communicating with the Housing Association, education transition worker, the social worker in charge of the case as well, and sort of liaising with the police as well. So we're sort of trying to bring all parties together really to ensure this contextual approach really has an impact on this young person. And as I said, it is working really quite well at the moment for this particular young person as well.
We wanted to just share with you just 5 examples of some of the young people that we've been working with over the past few months, partly to kind of challenge the stereotyping really of exploitation, because I know sort of when you look at Home Office material and things like that, historically it's sort of the young kid on the council estate who's got nothing at home, and that's why they're sort of making these sort of impulsive decisions. But as seen here, we cover a wide spectrum of young people. There are some sort of similarities between a lot of the young people that we're working with. I think you will all be more than aware there's been a massive increase in kids never known to services before that sort of come into light. I think COVID-19 has presented new challenges for everybody, but also it's meant that a lot of kids are having an increased amount of free time. I think certainly from a CSE point of view, it's had sort of a massive impact on the work that we're doing through sort of the social isolation that kids are experiencing, the fact that they're not in school all day. Has had a massive impact, and I think social media again is meaning that kids are communicating sort of across localities now, which again has sort of presented its own challenges. We just wanted to kind of summarise really some of the things that sort of we've sort of learnt, I guess, sort of over the past few months. The thing around trauma being a fluid and ongoing process, we think is really significant. We think that all kids are vulnerable, and vulnerability is more of a sliding scale, as is sort of exploitation. As Sean sort of said about the low, medium and high, I know that we've had lots of conversations around actually it's much more of a sliding scale, and kids can very much slide up and down that scale based on sort of things that are happening at home, things that are happening at school, that sort of thing. And actually the work that we've been sort of doing is around sort of looking at tackling some of the vulnerabilities to prevent sort of exploitation sort of becoming an increasing problem. School exclusions and lack of school engagement is an underlying factor in nearly all cases, whether that be because they're not in school because of exclusions, or for some kids they just don't want to go in school, so attendance levels are really low. And I think what we've seen really in sort of an example of good practices, where we've worked in partnership with some of the social workers around appropriately challenging educational establishments, around exclusions and alternative to exclusions. There's kids that go in and they know exactly what to do to get kicked out for the day. A prime example of a lad that can go in a hoodie to school and he knows straight away he'll be sent home. There's some of your colleagues have worked really well alongside us in sort of trying to appropriately challenge schools and looking at alternatives to exclusion, because in our eyes, if a child is deemed medium or high risk of exploitation, if there's an opportunity for them to be safe for between the hours of 9 and 3, 5 days a week, we need to grab it with both hands. So that's sort of a sort of ongoing sort of process. You can go to again, as Paul sort of said, when one person's removed from an area, other young people see this as an opportunity to step up. Winsford's a massive sort of example of that from a CCE point of view, but also from a CSE point of view. What we've been finding is sort of the nature of the girls that are going missing. Often as one friendship group breaks down, they just move on to a sort of different friendship group, and this whole concept of them going missing together and sort of interacting over social media to meet up is huge. So actually what I do a lot is sort of question those sorts of friendships to try and sort of break down some of those friendship groups so that it prevents them sort of going missing together. Lot of, as I say, the social isolation is a massive problem, because it's meaning that a lot of girls in particular are turning to social media to meet their sort of social needs, if you like, and obviously apps like Wink, Yubo and things like that are meaning that they're meeting unknown males online, and you know, at times it might be young people that are of a similar age, but the risk that they're willing to take to go and meet those young people out of area is massively significant. So they're travelling to, you know, areas in the Wirral and things like that. They're going to Liverpool on a regular basis to meet people that, you know, they consider to be in a relationship with because they've had, you know, a few conversations with them. And I think that's quite a significant thing at the moment. And you know, we've been working massively with working with the parents and carers and the young people to encourage the sharing of information to statutory services. So whether that, you know, be the police, whether that be yourselves, you know, I'm working with a young girl at the moment who has only just started to have social care involvement. You know, parents had some her older siblings, and there was a big gap before she was born, so things have moved on quite significantly, and they've sort of struggled to sort of move with the times in some respects. So you know, when the young girl has not come home sort of straight away, back in the day, well, they'll be home in half an hour anyway, so you know, they're not used to sort of having to phone the police and things like that. So again, we work alongside parents and carers to sort of appropriately safeguard their children. So again, sort of looking at this whole thing about being a proactive, not reactive service, we're massively sort of passionate, as I say, about sort of the encouraging the sort of mapping meetings, and both the mapping meetings that we take part in, you know, within the local authority. We also do it internally as well, because we're just keen to kind of break down some of the networks of these young people, and as an effective groomer would sort of entice a young person in and really get the sort of loyalty going. You know, a large part of our work is questioning that loyalty and questioning the sort of ties that they have with these people, and questioning if they did care about you that much, would they be making you do X, Y, and Z. So you know, as Paul's already sort of alluded to as well, you know, the contextual safeguarding approach is very much at the heart of everything we do, sort of embedding that sort of whole child approach to all the intervention that we offer. And this is just to kind of reinforce the fact that, you know, we're really sort of keen to contribute to review tools. If a young person that we're working with is undergoing an 8-week programme and it's sort of coming to the end of that 8 weeks, and both ourselves and both Queensberry and yourselves feel that there needs to be an extension to that, there's an extension form that can be completed, and you would complete sort of one part of it, we would sort of contribute to that, and then that's discussed at the hub as an assessment for, you know, as an assessment tool would be discussed. And just sort of what's been our biggest sort of win situations, I guess, have been where there's been that ongoing communication with social care throughout the whole process, and it's a much more holistic approach to supporting the families as opposed to sort of working in isolation. And we had massive grins on our face when Alison was saying that it is working, because obviously, you know, we are really keen to, you know, support the most vulnerable across the local authority in a very holistic way, to ensure that we're doing the best for not only the young person but also sort of their family, so that, you know, there is that sustainable approach to what, you know, to what we're offering.